Hi everyone, thanks for having me tonight. My name's Olga. I'm a senior front-end engineer at Homegate. And actually there couldn't have been a better primer as Patrick's talk. That has been amazing. And I'm actually going to talk about some stuff that is related to it. We at Homegate also do continuous delivery. We deploy also in under 10 minutes, like a million times a day. And I guess that's why a lot of CRUP people actually decided to join us at some point. So you probably know some of our guys. Right. Thanks again for the talk. That was super inspiring. I think it was amazing. So my goal here is to talk a little bit about testing, and first and foremost about the importance of it, because you cannot stress that enough. But before I do that, let's start with a quiz, simple show of hands, nothing complicated. So raise your hand if the answer is yes. Okay. First question: are your front-end components unit tested? Oh wow. Should I do a talk on unit testing as well? Okay, no judgment. Is your web application UI automatically tested in browser? All right, same people. So I guess the next question is going to be pointless. Do you enjoy writing tests? Okay, so some people enjoy, but they don't write them for some reason, right? And the last one, would you feel safe if every change gets automatically deployed to production? Okay, some. It's the same guys, right? So you see that that's kind of connected. So let me dwell a little bit. Yeah, this is how we answer this question at Homegate, right? We answer it with yes, honey. We deploy. So let me dwell about a little bit on why is it important, right? So I think I have this theory that in software engineering, especially UI engineering, we always care about users, and we spend so much time doing user research, A/B testing, and our UX designers, they design these personas and they hang them on the walls and they challenge every feature. Will Taylor like the sharing functionality? Will Elton appreciate, I don't know, this kind of button? And I think, this is my theory, that in every set of personas created for every kind of software in the world, there's one persona missing. And this is a very tired engineer. And I would say, I have to also say that I had not one but two burnouts because I never learn. But I don't have also research to back that up, but I guess we all understand what kind of product a burnt out or annoyed or angry person is going to produce. It implicitly impacts our users, right? Also, some people say that, engineers, they're just, they just work there, but it's the users that earn us the money. I would argue that if you are tired or annoyed or really don't like what you're doing, you also work slower. So in this case, you're also wasting the company's money, which is, I think, could be measured at some point. So we as engineers, we have kind of different use cases, right? We could be like this guy on the left, working on the project for ages, knowing it inside out, and then we're quite safe, feel quite safe to deploy changes. Or we could be the newcomers, right? The ones who just joined the team. Sometimes you join a team that worked on a massive project, and it kind of intimidates you from time to time. Or you could be a visitor, right? It's the one that jumps into the project, does some modifications, and jumps out, like consultants work like that, for example. But I think that no matter what you do, how you work, and how often do you modify which kind of code, we all deserve to feel safe to work, right? So how do we get there? This is, again, my theory, that testing strategy is the thing that is gonna make you feel safe, right? You will be able to catch regressions automatically. You will have documentation for your code, which, to be honest, wasn't obvious to me until I actually started covering everything with tests, right? How many times did you open someone else's code and have seen something you don't understand, and then you wish there was a documentation? But to be fair, whoever updates any kind of docs, right? And of course, there is the support during refactoring. So also, for me, it's an emotional support as well. So, I'm a bit of a weird person. I like when tests fail. This is how I know they work, right? So this is me. And then another point that I have been hearing a lot of time, I've been in software development for a while, especially in Frontend, I keep hearing that still, right? And this is another personal crusade of myself, is to basically keep spreading the word that front-end engineering is actually insanely freaking complex, right? This is why. we have no idea where our software is gonna run, which OS, which browser, which device even, right? And we're supposed to present some dynamic data. It's supposed to be good for both people and robots. It's supposed to be good for looking at it and for listening to it if you cannot see. And we do it with a combination of really weird languages. One of them is CSS, right? Like, could it be any worse? Also that. Anybody can relate, front-end engineers? So how can we stop basically worrying about our modifications and start deploying 60 or even more times per day, right? We can try and wear a helmet, and just, take some drugs to, stop being scared, or we can try and lawyer up with automated tests. So before I start talking about testing a bit deeper, I have normally problems talking about test types above unit tests, like integration and end-to-end, because there's the definitions are so fuzzy and people constantly argue whether it's integration already end-to-end. So I'm going to use two types of terms. One is unit test, which we all, I hope, agree on. This is something that is testing a component in isolation. And for front-end engineering, I would call the rest of the tests browser tests, right? And then you can decide whether you call it integration or end-to-end. These are a couple of examples, right? So it's kind of the same, but it is slightly different, right? Why? So unit test tests a component in isolation. And if you're working with any of the component-based frameworks that are modern, like Angular, React, Vue, you would mostly cover the HTML and JavaScript working together, but you will not cover CSS. And you will not cover anything that is styling your application from third-party library, right, from the outside. And when you're testing the components with unit testing frameworks, you basically emulate certain events, right? So sometimes it's not a real event. And also you're checking DOM changes, and sometimes it's not necessarily what user sees. And in browser tests, you basically have collected everything, every single part that makes front-end engineering, and then you're testing the end result. And this is how users experience our web app. So this is our testing strategy currently, a little schematically. This is the kind of tests we have. So the biggest part, of course, is unit tests, right? And we run them both on pre-commit hook and in the CI build environment. Then we have a little thinner layer of browser unit tests. This is what I'm going to be talking about today, which runs also in CI build. And then we have the thinnest possible layer. It's about 4 tests or something of smoke tests, which we run post-deployment, after deployment to test and after deployment to production. So this is our last resort before we deploy to production, right? So we can check connectivity and routing and this kind of stuff. So Cypress is awesome for browser tests. We started using Cypress for our new re-engineered stuff that we're doing currently at Homegate. So we're engineering the core website currently. And I fell in love pretty much immediately, right? So people who have been working maybe with something Selenium-based or have at least seen how a Selenium-based test looks will understand why there were so few hands up today, because it is a hassle, right? Selenium uses web drivers, and the API there basically makes you do all the work in terms of waiting and retrying in case the element still hasn't showed up for all the animations and so on. Cypress API eliminates all of that. When I have seen this, I almost couldn't believe that this is possible. So they basically designed it to be used easily by engineers, and this is amazing. They have everything for stubbing and spying, including network traffic, so you can mock your APIs, stub them. And another thing that I liked a lot was the user interface that they provide. So you can not only run your tests in the headless mode, like in the CI, you have a nice UI, which makes debugging really easy. Because normally, if you're running a headless mode and your end-to-end test fails, you're pretty much clueless, right? Because it's spun up some browsers that you do not see, and you just basically resort to guessing, what exactly happened. Did something overlay something else? But in Cypress, using this UI, you have real-time reloads, you can time travel between steps, and you get a preview of every single step. I'm going to show it later. And of course, screenshots and videos, right? So you can record them in the CI. Cool. So how about demo? Right. I've spun up a very complicated application. It displays a list of cocktails, a long list of cocktails. It fetches them from the API that I've done for different projects. And behold, it's responsive, right? So let's try and write some Cypress tests that we normally would write. So since there are lots of cocktails, let maybe try it and check if some data is present. So I like martinis, so I'm going to check if martini is over there. This is the Cypress spec, and you can see that, the opening the page is as easy as this. That's because I'm just testing the website's route, and I can provide the base URL. And then you can immediately start writing specs. And one of the cool things that I think makes it easier to write tests from the perspective of users is that you don't always have to pick out elements by their DOM selectors. You can do something like this. By text, right? And you don't have to wait. You don't have to retry. If this element appears like it's still in a reasonable time within the Cypress timeout, this test is going to pass, which is, to me, it's just amazing. So I'm going to run the, if it's going to run. It's running already. OK, I'm going to stop it or not. Yeah, this is the UI. So if you run it, you get the specs that you can run individually or all together. And this is how the individual spec preview looks like. So you can see to the left a test that I just wrote. It passed because there is a martini somewhere over here. And you see what just happened. I mouse over, and the preview just jumped to how the website looked at that particular step of the test. So if I go before, of course, there were no data. This is how the website looked before. So imagine what you can do with this. So to get elements, it's also pretty easy. Let's try and check if there is a picture of martini somewhere. So you write a selector like you normally would do with jQuery, if anybody remembers that. Right, so. But this is how I get the element, but then what I want to do is this. I want to check if it's visible, not just if it's in the DOM, if it's rendered, but if user can see it. So for that, Cypress has super handy assertions. In the Chai style, they support that. Just like this, should be visible. All right, and this is, I can recognize the expression. Good, I have, exactly, I forgot the quotes. So it found the image tag. So what this should be visible actually means. So when I found out about that, that also blew my mind. So what if I do this? Right, it's not even display none. And we run the test. It fails, as it should be. And if you guys can see here and read, it says it fails because the image tag has a CSS property, visibility hidden, right? If I hide its parent element, what do you think it's going to do? See, it's been trying. It figured it out. It tells you which thing basically impacted the problem, and then you can go and fix it, right? So imagine like third-party CSS or, I don't know, something else modifying your code. You can find it really easy. OK, so what kind of tests are we writing with Cypress? As I mentioned before, like we're covering a lot of stuff with unit tests, like everything basically that connects JavaScript and HTML, so how the elements are rendered or not rendered in DOM, how they react to events. But again, CSS is kind of a hard thing to test. So this would be one of the typical tests that we would do. Let me paste it quickly here for the page. So we would test, for example, how a responsive layout works, whether the CSS actually works and all the selectors and everything is correct. So in this test, we open the website with the screen size of iPhone 5. Cypress has these handy methods and presets that you could use. Or as here, you could just specify coordinates. And then you basically can get a few elements and check if their coordinates are equal. So for example, if image left coordinate and the diff with text left coordinate are equal, then you get kind of this view, right? And if they're not equal, then this is it. And actually, this is more or less enough to test all kinds of layouts. You can make it even more complex with like different paddings and so on, but this is how you can basically lawyer up against like CSS mess up. Another thing I wanted to show is how to mock your APIs, which we also are doing because, if you're writing, like, for example, something, search results page or something like that, it's always different. So you need to provide some kind of stable mock so that you can, compare the output with the input, right? So in Cypress, it's easy as doing something like this. You start a server, and then you can route certain URLs like this one. This is my API for cocktails. And say that method of get has to respond with a status 200, and you can give it some kind of response. So I'm going to stub it right now with some response that I prepared. It's just 3 cocktails. And we're going to see. Oh, got to fix the app first. So if I open this test, you see that it is stubbed, and you see that you only get, let's click somewhere, just 3 of them. So stub away, right? With that being said, it's also super easy to run Cypress in CI. So if you're running something like GitLab using Docker containers, there are plenty of Docker containers with this thing already installed, and it's an npm package. So in case you don't have Docker, you can do it yourself. So doing this is super important because if you don't run your tests, they don't make any sense. This is my only beef with Cypress. It only supports Chrome, right? And everybody tells me that, yeah, you shouldn't be using Cypress because it only supports Chrome. But then my answer is like, what are you using? And people tell me nothing. And I'm like, okay, so maybe testing everything in browser, at least in Chrome, which has like a big user base, is actually better than nothing. But our teammates and I were watching this issue really closely, and we're just hoping that at some point the support's going to arrive. So I'm going to share the slides. Here are some useful links, like especially the second one. It has basically all the API nicely listed. So if you're looking for something really quickly and you know how it's called in different test frameworks, you're going to find it there. And no matter what kind of tools you choose, Selenium or Cypress or something else, or you want to write like completely everything from scratch, I think the important thing is that you write awesome tests, that you cover your code base, and that you make yourself and your teammates and newcomers feel safe. That's it.